Houzhi Wang, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Houzhi. I'm a PhD student from Mechanical Engineering, School of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Adelaide. And today, I'm going to talk about analysis of permeability and pressure drop in southeastern Australian woody debris fill beds. And I'm also going to talk about prescribed burning from the perspective of engineering. So prescribed burning has a very long history, and we use that to reduce the risks of large-scale wildfires. And also, we use that as a tool for forest management. And in the past decades, because of climate change, prescribed burning is also becoming a promising measure that can be used to reduce carbon emissions. But there are also some arguments on the prescribed burning. Like, for example, the effectiveness of prescribed burning on wild mitigation. And also is, as I said, that prescribed burning can be used to reduce carbon emission, but it's very difficult for us to know how much can we reduce. And lastly, can the cost of prescribed burning be further reduced? And to me, I think the main reason we have these kind of challenges is because we still don't know much about the prescribed burning. And hence, I believe that a physical mode could help us to better understanding prescribed burning and also address these issues. So, talking about prescribed burning is we are actually using combustion as a tool to reduce fuel load in forest. And so because of that, it is very important for us to understand the combustion process involved in prescribed burning. And there are mainly two types of combustion process involved in prescribed burning. On the left-hand side is flaming combustion, which is the most common. You have seen that in the background, the visible flame. And the second type, which is actually my thesis, my PhD thesis about, it's the smouldering combustion. So I think most of you would be very familiar with smouldering combustion, but scientifically, smouldering combustion is a slow and low temperature form of combustion which shows no flame. And it plays important roles in fire escape, carbon emissions, and environment impacts. And unlike flaming combustion, smouldering combustion does not have any obvious indications such as visible flame, high temperature, or high emissions. And more importantly, under certain conditions, smouldering combustion can last for a very long period of time, from days to weeks or even months. And during that long period of time, smouldering combustion continues to produce carbon emissions, and which cause pollutions and all kinds of environmental impacts. So smouldering combustion is important in prescribed burning, but smouldering combustion has been scarcely investigated from the point of view of prescribed burning. And to have a better understanding of smouldering combustion, we developed a combustion testing rig as shown in this figure. So basically, we have an infrared heat lamp on the top, which to provide energy to start a smouldering combustion in the reactor down in the bottom. And from the results, I showed you the results here. So basically, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to look at the effects of airflow velocity and radiant heat flux on the different combustion regimes. And you can say that smouldering combustion, it is easier to start smouldering combustion under low airflow velocity. And compared to flaming combustion, smouldering combustion requires much lower energy to start. And the next one, it's the effects of oxygen concentration and heating time on the self-sustained smouldering combustion. And you can see from these figures that self-sustained smouldering combustion can survive on a very low oxygen concentration, approximately 10%. So from previous two figures, we know that the oxidizer flow rate and its oxygen concentration have significant effects on the smoldering combustion. And in other words, it would be necessary to know that how the oxidizer transmit through the fuel bed. And hence, we developed another testing rig, permeability testing rig. So basically, what we are doing here is we're trying to measure the velocity and pressure difference before and after the fuel bed. So we can use that to determine the permeability of that fuel bed. So here's some preliminary and also, by the way, we developed a computational fluid dynamics model, which can help us to also determine and predict the permeability of fuel bed. And from the result, on the right-hand side, it's a CFD velocity streamline. Basically shows how the air or oxidizer enter the reactors and goes through the fuel bed. And on the left-hand side shows a comparison between the experimental and CFD results of example eucalyptus bark fuel bed. And you can see that the results shows, the CFD results showed a good overall agreement with the experimental results. And from the previous results, we can calculate the permeability of the fuel bed using the Darcy's law. And from the results here, we can say that the eucalyptus bark and pine chips shows a very similar trends, while the eucalyptus leaves is much lower in permeability. And this is because like the shapes of the pine chips particle and the eucalyptus bark particle are very similar, while the shapes of eucalyptus leaves are quite different. So in summary, combustion experiment results show that oxidizer flow rate and its oxygen concentration have significant effects on the initiation of different combustion regimes. The permeability testing rig was developed to investigate the permeability of a fuel bed. A CFD model was developed to help understand and predict the permeability of a fuel bed. The CFD results showed a good overall agreement with the experimental results. Conclusion and future work. The permeability is a controlling factor of different combustion regime in the fuel bed. And with the same particle diameter, the eucalyptus leaves fuel bed has the lowest permeability. And from the perspective of permeability, it will be easier to initiate smoldering combustion in the fuel beds of eucalyptus leaves compared to the other fuels. The permeability of a fuel bed can be predicted if the particle size in that fuel bed is known. And also from the previous results, we know that in the future we need to consider the shape of the particle in order to better predict the permeability of fuel bed. And in future, more experiments will be conducted using a wider range of fuel samples from forests, such as stringy buck and rainbow buck. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Houzhi. You're very well on time, so are there any questions? Oh, I again have a question.
Yeah.
How do your lab measurements, the values you measure in the lab, how do those correspond to a fire spread of smoldering combustion in the field? Can you elaborate on that?
Honestly, at this stage, it would be a little bit difficult. But the purpose of my work is not, at this stage, not trying to compare my work in lab to what's happening in the real world. It's trying to help develop the model that can be used in future to compare. So we are not trying to use the result in the lab to compare with the real world, but to use the results in the lab to help develop the model that can be future used in make the prediction. Yep.
So you mean if you get the mechanisms right,
yes,
then you can test those mechanisms with what's happening and then use those further. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm looking at my neighbor. No? All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.